Hey Wholeness, this is Josh of Integrating Presence, and today I've got Randy Green back with me. You might be wondering what we're watching on the screen. Well, I was on Twitter earlier this morning, and these are officially released videos of UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, from the cbp.gov site. So that's the Customs and Border Patrol .gov site of the United States, and it's September 22nd as we're recording this, 2023. And Randy hasn't seen these, so what we're going to do is we'll just she might give some commentary, or it might be other things completely unrelated. Just for the bookkeeping, record-keeping thing here, there's about an hour and 13 minutes of video here, maybe 13 different videos. We're starting with the second one, which is 15 minutes long. I think the 2.1 and then 2.2 will be another 15 minutes long. We'll jump back to the first one, then they'll go on to 3 in sequential order. So that's all I've got. Randy, what do you got?
What have I got? Well, first and foremost, I'm not going to do the sports commentary, as in here we are seeing clearly footage or off the ground looking for, since it's the border control, we could assume it's looking for trespassing or things that shouldn't be there. Sorry about that. And since I haven't seen it before, I won't be able to say, oh, this is where we have got the UAPs, or as they, again, I assume most of you that are watching this, you have listened to the US hearing and some of the other material, some of the hearing also from NASA and NASA, where they talk about the new programs. We have got AARO that are now taking information from people that are having footage similar, I guess, similar in the similar way as MUFON and other collectors have done for, or researchers have done for quite some time. The reason why I'm more fond of doing this footage from what we call an official side is because there is so much noise out there. It's difficult for people on the ground to figure out what is footage, or what is made for entertainment, or what is real deal, and what is just plain scam, which again, I just don't understand why people could find it interesting to produce so many hoaxes and so many things that just throw us off. Other than, of course, going into a little bit more of what we call the fringe theories about it, that perhaps they are being orchestrated to do that kind of scam for the purpose of exactly throwing us off. But I don't want to go down that path. We are, and again, I know this sounds like a little bit of a commentary as we are watching the royal's wedding or something. But the where we are right now, for those of you who are not up to speed, we are shifting the paradigm. And this means a new reality for science. And as the NASA hearing was about whatever faction is talking and whoever is there is now a legit effort to try and figure out, what is this? Is it something that we should take into consideration? The joint majority of people are now saying yes. Is it a threat? We don't know. But this is, for me, the political agenda is to, if it has to be funded, then it must be funded from the idea that it is a threat. Because if it's not a threat, well, then there are other things in the fiscal year that probably is more important to fund if you see things from a political point of view. So it has to be something that is a threat. My personal take is also on this, that since we know there is an industry going on, all of you who've done this for years, you know it, the military-industrial complex. There is an interest in producing new type of technology and get that launched. And for that, we need new stories. We need new paradigms that tells us we are having a new paradigm here. We are having need for new type of technology. And for me, that if you ask me, what is the bigger purpose of releasing this from so many angles right now? That is because there's new technology that needs to be launched. I talked about that years ago as part of the implementation plan of some of the sciences and technologies from the future humanities. So that means my angle on this is different. Most are looking at this as non-human or extraterrestrial. And for me, it is absolutely not non-human. Some of it is, of course, we can't say all over one fit all. There are from other dimensional and extraterrestrial species, of course. There are also from private contractors on our planet that are operating what we call within special access projects, or deep hidden projects that nobody knows of, probably not even the ones that are part of it knows of it, due to different ways that the human mind can be manipulated and altered into perceiving and understanding reality from a perspective that is not always what we think it is. When we look at this screen right now, all these little black dots, is it anything, or what's your take on that, George?
I'm wondering, I'm probably, if anybody's actually looking at the screen listening to this, then they're probably wondering, they say, what is this? Now I did jump ahead a little bit. Randy hasn't seen much of the other ones, but I have, and we'll actually get to some things that are more obviously clear. I'm wondering now if it's just the screen blanked out, but I doubt that's anything, right?
Yeah.
Now we see a black shadow or something going on here, and yeah. So
do you have any idea where this footage is taken from? Is it drone? Or?
So this is another thing. The relevant metadata to this I haven't looked up. I just jumped into this to make it timely, just to get the raw videos. If anyone wants the metadata, perhaps we'll include it in the show notes. But just with the date, you can look on the site to September 22nd, and more than likely there'll be some metadata on this. And I'm sure there's a crack team of independent reporters and people, talking online about all this stuff. And I'm sure somebody will have a list to the links of what we're seeing here officially. Yeah.
So that leads us into what are we going to talk about? We know others will look into this footage and dissect it within whatever system of thought and ideas they have. And so will we, of course. That's the whole purpose of this. And for many, many years, this has been a personal interest, as everybody else that does this. Those of us who are into this, we already were put onto the ideas around age 13 in our teens, and got this feeling that this was important as part of our life to investigate what it was. And then we start looking into all of the information that was out there, the books that was out there, and found very little or very heavy type of material that were what we could call definitely more outlandish and fringe than was beneficial for the case. Again, we can ponder upon whether it was just due to human speculation and fantasy, or due to what we could call hidden programs that were pushed into people's minds so they would deliberately put out information that was not accurate. In my inner exploratory work with what most will call remote viewing, and my looking into things and what I have got access to via my encounters and part of these different types of reality programs that I've been pushed through for whatever reasons that is, there is a lot of holographic overlay. And the challenge for those of us who are part of these otherworldly programs, whether we will it or not, because for me, I never chose to be part of it, and no, I don't have a soul contract that put me into this. I feel from the very get-go this is done against my free will on all levels, and I don't enjoy it, and I don't like it, and it's not something I'll say, oh cool, that makes me whatever. So point being is the information that is tied to this one, interestingly enough, Josh had this let's do this video, and at the same time I got a different download. So I will listen to that download and the image that I got as a kind of probing into saying, okay, what are we dealing with here? Not on the footage, because people can make up their own mind according to their own paradigms. But what is it that I, in this situation, has, and Josh as well, has been pushed in to say, what is the information that needs to be given as a different angle to whatever is out there that might say a lot of other clever stuff. So let us put together and say this is a pattern of information. We are different people that are coming forth with different angles on the same topic. That is called a scientific investigation. There's not one answer. There's many theories. There are many ideas. But one of the things that I feel that we lack a lot is the frame of reference. That is, from where we're talking. what's the context of this? Is it just from human, we are alone in the universe context? Well, then of course we'll have a lot of unanswered questions. Is it from the 80s and 90s ideas of reptilians and different forms of avian species and otherworldly humanoids that are here? Is it from the angle of the android technocratic worlds, the parallel worlds that are also working close to ours? What we're dealing with here? Is it from light beings? Is it from organic beings? Is it from whatever kind of information that's been out there? And for those of you who are new to this topic and just stumble upon it because you were born later and are now picking up and are trying to do a catch up compared to the rest of us that have been dealing with for 20 and 30 years. I remember a lot of information's been giving out there. In one of the podcasts we did together, Josh, we talked about the UFO and who are the aliens. And I said, I'm not going down that path. And there was a comment that kind of, yeah, what's the point then? Well, the point is not to replicate what's already been said. There's so much information out there. And do I personally believe that these are reptilians and different forms of subterranean races that are playing out their technology on our planet? Years ago, I was into that idea, but not today. And that is again due to the information that I've been given, whether that is legit or it's a manipulation. And we don't know. And that's, for me, the most important part of this investigation, looking into this, is to constantly scrutinize. Is this a manipulation? What is the agenda? What is the purpose? Why are we being presented with this? And not just jump in with both feet and do pause in the air and say, whoa, this is it. This is the proof that the aliens are here, because we don't really know. And that's the scientific mind, the hat we need to put on, not just jump into what other UFO researchers have been working with for decades. The whole, what was going on Mars and the reptilians, and we don't know. We can say we have a lot of people that have memories of reptilians, that have visual encounters, that have envisioned it in dream state, in altered state. And I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying perhaps that's also kind of an overlay. If you remember from my book, Modern History, where I talk with whether it's an entity or it's an angry ghost or whatever it is, then the whole plot was there that these interception technologies were put there to throw us off, going down rabbit holes with reptilians and blue avians, and people were seeing this. I've seen my share of it. I've experienced this, but I've also experienced that when I remove the cloaking, then typically I end up in the scenario that many others have reported as well, my labs, military labs, that secret programs where I there encounter what we could say hybrids. Some of them are androids, some of them are humans, some of them are enhanced humans that can shapeshift and actually take form as a reptilian feature via technology that creates a holographic overlay, so they appear as reptilian when in fact they are humans. So it all comes down to when I was in Australia and I had that mindset that this is reptilians, that there are insectoids, and we have got old cave paintings from, I think it's the UAPs, of the Orion people that looks like ant. That's my understanding as well. That was a confirmation. But we can also say perhaps these programs go so far back to the dawn of humanity, that they have been programmed to see demons or reptilians or ants or insectoids instead of actually seeing what was going on. And that's the idea I want to play with here today. Because if we go down that path that this is reptilians, well, we'll get nowhere. We'll just end up, people have been looking into that for 30 years now. Why does it not lead to more? Why is it just, I've seen it in vision, I experienced it in dreams, I saw it in an altered state. I'd used some kind of enhancement that led me to that altered state where I saw this. This could just be, as the shamans also saw in the old days, they just called it something differently. They called it the guardians of the underworld or whatever it was. So we're here dealing with, okay, we have the collective interpretation of it that goes in myth, that goes in shamanism, that goes in encounters, that goes in our own inner experiences. And now we suddenly have technology on the outside. And that's when I was in Australia and I was doing a little bit, that's where the event program was implemented, and I got an insectoid, interesting enough, coming in and telling me, as many of you that have seen spy movies always go for the money, but I got go for the technology. The technology is the answer to solve this conundrum, not the visions, not the encounters, not what you get from within, because that is interception technology. We have just the Havana syndrome. We know that the human mind can be manipulated in many ways and forms, both visually, auditory, but also via what we could call remote operating technology that can run across time and space following what we call frequency patterns that are similar to the neural network. It doesn't have to be what we could say a type of technology we are aware of. So I want to go into the whole topic of future humanities, as I talked about, both in the new reality for Earth as well as the new reality for humanity, that there are future humans that have traveled back in time that are here. And why are these future humans here? Is it due to this human civilization? No, it's because this human civilization, that means you and me and all of us that are now here, we used to be part of an advanced solar system civilization. Highly advanced, highly technological, operating cross-dimensionally, operating cross-sectorial, as it's called, and we were working inside this solar system as part of a restoration program due to what I call the timeline event, which science calls Big Bang, the origin of our universe in a solidified form as we know of it, and the creation of the frequency spectrum as we know of it, which is a flaw in the design, so to speak. Am I talking about intelligent design with the creator? No, I'm talking about advanced civilizations, the ability to construct solar systems, and the ability to literally manipulate time and space, because time and space doesn't exist, but operate on holographic energetic principles with technologies that are far more advanced than what we have now. So for me, not all of it, some of it, for instance, the Tic Tac, I see that as a work drone from some of our own original solar system advanced technologies that used to be part of the restoration program, upholding a specific configuration from where those of us who were hit by the timeline event got our original genetics altered by it, were choosing to isolate ourselves in the outer domain, or in this realm that we now call our planet, as well as some of the other planets, and there try to undo the effects of the timeline event with the different groups of humans and humanoids, because there are humanoids that were looking very different at the time, but due to regression, as I talk about in my books, The Souls of Humanity, began to take features of their previous cycles, which then actually turned them into reptoid looking. We are also having humans inside this restoration program that regress to the fact where they become what we call Neanderthals. So the Neanderthals are not the beginning of our civilization, it's the end of the original civilization. And that's a whole other angle of our history. So if we look at that angle and say, well, some of these technologies are actually our own, but we have lost the memory and the understanding of how they operate, and by that they seem foreign and unexplained for us. But the matter of the fact is that some of this is actually our own technology that are upholding our reality, monitoring the weather, monitoring the weather systems, monitoring what we call this physical reality that we are part of adjusting the human resonance, as we know, as part of the emotional field, orchestrating and integrating what we could call the adaptation processes of the electrochemical processes of the body. We have the frequency fence, and I'm here using this terminology because the human resonance is technically the astral barrier. The ionosphere is technically the frequency fence. These are also operated by different types of ionospheric drone systems, specifically the spheres with the cubes inside of them. Some of this go back to the projects of Atlantis. And some of this has been hijacked, as I talked about 15,000 years ago, where we had some of the other sectorial races, some of the regress races that came in and decided to take over the project. And those of us who were part of the original solar system humanities were then put into projects that were not our own, but were then coming under the what we call the control systems of these interfacing or interfering races from other sectors that do not belong here. So in that manner, we can say, well, there are aliens here, but they used to be human. But they regress to a degree, so they now appear alien to us. Some of them regress to a degree where they cannot have organic vessels anymore, and thereby have chosen the android form. And for me, that begins to answer quite a lot of the questions we have. If we look at, we are having an advanced universal structure with different lineages and different civilizations that due to a cataclysmic event, yes, I see it on the screen, due to a cataclysmic event, ended up regressing, transforming their reality fields, transforming the holographic energetic features, altered their genetic makeup to a degree where they began to produce features that looked more animalistic, that looked more reptilian, that looked more avian, beginning to have features that turned our humanity into primitive ape-like beings because we're based on mammal genetics. For me, then the whole, the cards begin to add up. Then it begins to say, okay, then that also makes sense why I talk about civilizations that are based upon insectoid genetics. They regress to that degree. Or avian genetics, they regress to that degree. Or reptoids, they regress to that degree. Or mammal, they regress to that degree. Some of the mammals on our planet, some of the animals are part of what some of their holographic energetic remains in their physical form are part of an advanced civilization that used to either prosper here or on other planets. Quite a lot of the animals on our planet from Saturn. So this is a claim, but this is my angle on it. And when I have that set of glasses on, well, then these phenomenon are not that unexplained. For me, it's just, oh yeah, remember that type of drone, that's a work pod. The Tic Tac, aside from being a drone that comes in and monitors and weaves some kind of reality program whenever there is a gap there. These Tic Tacs come in, they repair the holographic program, upholding the quote-unquote illusion of the restoration program. Again, it goes further back than that to some of the other civilizations that were part of the project here, which we now have dubbed Syrian and Pleiadian due to some of the newer understandings of these civilizations during the ancient times or the antique, going back to Babylon and these kind of things. So we have given these new names, and it's not the constellations in the sky. These civilizations are what we could call other sectorial. Whatever's on the sky is kind of, I have no problem calling it a dome. It's a holographic overlay. But it's not a dome as if you can breach through it, then you will fall off, and it's nothing to do with flat Earth. That's just an interpretation from the Middle Ages. But it is the understanding that we are in a kind of an enclosure, and that we are in a kind of artificial reality, and that reality is upheld by different forms of unexplained aerial phenomenon that are different types of cubes, different types of cubes works with the ionospheric level. The Tic Tac goes into the fourth dimension, breaching into our reality, which is why they are being observed, the more cylindrical ones. We also have the work pods that are able to manifest from the fourth dimension into ours and land on a specific spot where we then can work in an environment that both goes from this reality into the fourth. So the Tic Tac is both a drone that are weaving things, but it can also be a work pod that you can land, and with that have your own little science lab that both operate in the fourth dimension outside the enclosure while you're inside the enclosure. And that's how I recall some of these Tic Tacs. There are more of one. They have been spotted a long time. It's not just what Fravor he saw in one of his encounters in 2017, Commander Fravor. It's been done long before that. It's been reported long before that. Of course, we also have some of the android craft on the sky, which are called jolts, because they can also operate in the fourth dimension and manifest into this reality, where they can then connect with the frequency energies and manifest in a manner that we will then interpret them as solidified or manifest in terms of frequency within the frequency spectrum. And there the androids are in use because they can both operate in the fourth dimension but also inside our reality. And some of these androids are part of the original, once the infection hit hard on most of our solar system, androids were the ones that were operating in between realities where the genetic breakdown had hit hard. So androids came in play there to maintain and operate. I call these the maintainer race. I talk about that in modern history as well. And then I know some of the critique that has been on my book, Modern History, is that yes, you begin with the aliens and then you shift into spirituality. Well, it's not spirituality, it's the holographic energetic energy system that's behind all advanced civilizations. Nothing to do with spirituality, nothing to do with souls, nothing to do with anything that people would like to call creators. I don't work with that. I work with advanced civilizations, and we have created this. There is no source. There's the core domains, where we have the access points for previous universal cycles. That is the origin. We could call it that of consciousness potentials as it is in this cycle. But in the previous universal cycles, it was not consciousness as we know of it. It was technology and the conquering of spatial energies as we understand it. So in a way, our space and what is here is a remnant of the previous universal cycle. And why is that here, the 4%? That's because it's part of the restoration. Those that were hit by the timeline event due to experimentation of third cycle energies into the current cycle energies led to a breach into the previous universal spatial types of energies. And new realms were needed to be created for those who had got the now cross configuration between these universal cycles and the previous universal cycles that demanded spatial energies, time and space as we know of it. So that's part of the restoration. So that's the enclosure. Wherever we have space-time, that's part of the enclosure. Is the enclosure local? No, we know from the quantum principles it's non-local. It expands where the mind perceives it. It expands where we look at it. It alters and interacts with our perception of it. As we change our perception of reality, then how we perceive the expandedness of the universe we are part of will change accordingly. When we work with the idea that this exists, we manifest it, we create it, we co-create that type of energy into the enclosure because it's made holographically interactive for the sole purpose of upgrading our genetics back to the original components. Again, the flaw in all of that was that we did not foresee that some of the ones we work with would turn against us and hijack this system and make it theirs and make it work what they needed as part of the harvesting programs, which are fizzling out now. They are at their end game because they have moved on. But that has been part of the last 15,000 years. So we again moving from the reptoid, avian, insectoid paradigm of the fourth dimension, where these regressed races have resided for a long time in artificial worlds. And some of the technology we've seen a part of their programs. And some of the crafts we've seen a part of their android species that are operating inside this reality, taking some of the original maintainer grays, re-engineering them for their purpose, working against those of us who are now in physical form and forgotten completely who and what we are. And the future humanities, to tie into that one, where do they come from? They were part of some of the original programs, and once our solar system was hijacked, they shifted out of this reality, went into other systems such as the Andromedan systems and other parallel systems, from where they are traveling back and trying to undo the hijacking and get us back on track on the reactivation potentials of our full upgrading systems. And I'm sorry for talking in that way. So some of the things I'm seeing when I'm working with this, for instance, today when I first got to the typical overlay, I worked my way through that one. Then I got into the quote-unquote mind lab scenario, worked my way through that one because I'm beginning to get a feel this is a program. Working my way through that one, and then I ended up in some of the hybrid races from the future Andromedan system. And then the question is, why do they show me this? Why do they show it in that cloaking? And the answer is because my neural network needs to upgrade to be able to perceive and understand what I'm actually looking at. And with that, need to work my way through different types of illusions that will upgrade my neural network to be able to work multidimensionally with different concepts that are not typically induced via the internet or via movies or books or what other people come up with. Technically engineering a human brain that operates in a completely dissimilar way. And that technology, the interception, has also been used for ill. So
much there. Actually, it was a great summary too of not only the recent videos you put out, but just a lot of your work in general too.
Yeah.
So I don't even know where to go into that. Maybe some things will come up later. Maybe some people were also wondering in the last videos what we were seeing track for quite a while. Yeah. Any thoughts on that, perhaps?
For me, that was one of the environmental drones, and I want to put in there when we have that, because we have the crisscrossing on the sky, and that's part of the hijacking programs of some of the parallel races, because in the 1950s we got new races coming in. Since the original hijackers were leaving, they were more or less done at that point in time. We got new openings coming in from other parallel systems, and they are what I call the real aliens, because the hijackers, they were part of the original programs. I remember them, I recall them as being part of some of the other workstations. So, but they shifted, and by that they got a different mindset, let's put it that way. They become service to self instead of working for the highest good of the many and the solar system restoration program at large, as it were, to undo the effects of the timeline event. And since things turned more and more into, that looks like a completely normal drone, doesn't it?
It almost looks like a black helicopter or something.
Yeah.
This is what's on screen now.
Yeah.
So we could pause it but why don't we just keep going? Yeah.
Well, it does actually have a little bit, what is it called, the TR, that one?
TR3B?
Yes, with the glider wings kind of thing.
Then there's something in the lower left-hand screen there too. But, but they would know, I think it's pretty well known, the TR3B, they would say that perhaps. Yeah. I don't know. So that was... But
it also gave off the energy. They are called the arrows that are used to be what we call quote-unquote Pleiadian aircrafts that has also been targeted and taken over. Now we see footage from similar to the other one. That's similar to the first one we actually saw. Is it re-looping back to that one?
No, this is a different video apparently.
Yeah, but it looks the same.
It does look very similar.
But let me just say, that one appears to me be one of the drones kind of thing. That is, there's a lot of drones running on the different levels of reality. They're completely automated. There are no human interaction in that one. They are connected to the reality program itself, so we won't get any human operators. There are no secret groups sitting behind these drones. They are built into the restoration program. As I said, when things went wrong, things became more and more automated in different sectors on our planet. We had the reseeding of the fourth cycle some around 50,000, 60,000 years ago, with what we understand as the Cro-Magnon, the shift out of the Neanderthal into the new quote-unquote type of human species. Different types of features were engineered so they could be seated on different places inside the enclosure. So that's the origin of the differences in the human organic vessels, so that they would fit the environment into which they were seated. Nothing to do with cultural or what we could call genotypes that were in different species, but they were connected to different upgrading programs that were to lead into different genetic reconfiguration systems.
So these environmental drones are just making sure the environment is habitable, basically, for whatever life is there. Yes. And so I'm guessing they report back to some other kind of technology that could then go in and make changes if need be, or make
some
decisions.
Of the cubes that will then go into the original, I call it the mother program of the restoration program. But the hijackers, they re-engineered this, and that's part of the crisscrossing. So some of the things we're seeing that are using holographic overlay to mimic an aircraft is instead some of these weather drones that are being changed into covering up the ionosphere whenever some of the parallel races that are alien wants to enter into our system, creating these triangular gate systems from where they breach from the fourth dimension into our reality field. And I also, when I look at that one, I get that because these drones, they can communicate with the original engineers of it, and that one is dysfunctional. That's why it's flying so low, and they become visible. Normally, they operate in the fourth dimension, but because of the hijacking, because of the crisscrossing, because of how the original technology has been modified for the different groups that have been here, these different types of technologies are now breaking down. They're losing their cloaking, and that's why they become visible.
Now, the crisscrossing, Randy did a video not too long ago on her channel.
Yeah, and I'm deliberate not mentioning a specific word
exactly,
here.
and I'm picked up on that. Now, let me see if this is one that we've repeated really briefly.
No, it's okay. Just let it run.
Should we go through?
Yeah, just let it run. There's a lot to be explained.
No, actually, this is video 3, so
okay, cool.
Shouldn't have been repeated. This should be a new one, although it is very similar to the ones we saw in videos 2.1, 2.2.
Either way, it leads into new levels of information because there, in the previous video, I was explaining the background. Here I'm looking at it and saying, no, I get it clear. It is dysfunctional. It's not working as supposed to. As part of some of the whether they were real or holographic programs have been kind of, can these cubes, can the original restoration program be repaired because it's breaking down? And I think that's one of the key understanding of this one is the reality program as we know of it is breaking down due to the hijacking and the re-engineering that these different groups under the Draco civilizations, the D10 quadrant, they did. And with that, they re-engineered the force cycle so they could do their harvesting programs, including Dreamtime programs, including the pulling programs, including some of the, when people encounter these quote-unquote reptilians, having interaction with these reptilians in different ways, including some of the military projects of the time that goes with the 1950s as part of an attempt to push out the parallel android species that are coming in. So we had in the 50s and the 60s a bit of what we call a different type of Cold War going on between the existing colonizing racing and the incoming android parallel technocratic civilizations that were, because of the breakdown technology already back then, we had a huge breakdown in the Middle Ages, which we got under control. Where we could see what was left of the 2-8 pillar began to surface into reality, which we now know as the Dark Middle Ages, and whatever came up there of astral entities, quote unquote, but these are actual, what we could call remaining shells of energy, holographic energetic energy systems of some of the previous civilizations that were hit hard by the timeline event, and by that lost their ability to have organic vessel but become purely energetic. So these are also stuck as part of our reality grid. So we have below us and above us issues that are now breaking down, not working as they're supposed to. So for those of us who are doing this work, for those of us who chose to come back in as part of our mission to either repair the technology or as part of dealing with the old racial grids and assume some kind of a teaching system where people could learn to deal with these inclusive I call them inclusions, energetic inclusions from previous timelines or racial grids that are connected to a human DNA as part of the original restoration program. To clear this out back then, some of them didn't make it, and hence we're stuck in some of these old holographic energetic layers of our planetary system, which we now know as the sediments, the different layers. We dig down in the layers and we find skeletons of different forms of reptilians or what have you, which could be planted there, which could be part of later projects, because there is no linear time when we talk about these advanced fourth dimensional projects that were engineered on our planet. I know this is a lot of information to be thrown in, but this is follow the trail of the technology, and this technology gives us the answers, and that is first and foremost that the original program is breaking down, which is my claim already in my books. The second is that we have got a lot of work for us to do. There are energetic work that needs to be done. That's the original understanding of the effects of a holographic energetic energy system from the timeline event, which has now been reverse engineered into spirituality. It is the understanding of our true capacity of consciousness, which also has been engineered into ideas of angels and different forms of light beings and different forms of spiritual entities or guides or programs at large that we call New Age. In my opinion, I might be wrong, but this is my opinion on it. And if we take all of this into factor all of that into our perception of what's going on, well, then it becomes easier in a way, because some of the confusion I saw with the UFO researchers ages ago, it feels like that for me, but 10 years ago, 20 years ago, was this whole kind of, where does the spirituality fit in? But what about if we say that's part of a program and take it out of the equation and say spirituality is actually our original consciousness potential is tied into a holographic energy system that operates directly and interactively with the reality that we're part of, as we know from science as well, quantum fields. But that's just the part of the astral barrier. That's the breaching point from the fourth dimension into this. So the quantum fields doesn't even exist either. That's the foundation of the reality program we're part of. And if we begin to play with ideas in a different way, scrutinize science and not only psychology and religion and spirituality, but also science, every paradigm that we have, and put it in a different context instead of what was the dead white man science that goes back to the Greeks and some of the ideas that were planted in as part of the colonizing races that wanted to throw us off whenever we had insights. Well, then it was kind of a tailored insight, or it was an intercepted insight, or it pushed us somewhere into a different program where we would get lost, which we have seen again and again and again. And perhaps that's why we don't get the answers, because we're literally not asking the right questions. So that's kind of where I will hang my hat and say that's the approach I have. And that could also be, and I want to put that in, that could also be manipulation. There is nothing that we can say that's the truth. Why can I claim that? Because I just said that this reality we're part of is interactive. So that means it upgrades and changes when we upgrade and change. Then we get a broader perspective of reality. Then we can reconnect to the original holographic energetic teaching system that's built into the reconstruction sites of the restoration program that we can connect to once we get our own holographic energy system cleared out of the intercepted 3 lower fields that the hijackers implanted into us. That is the biofield, emotional field, and mental field. Move beyond that into our true capacity of holographic energetic civilizations, where we can have physical forms, where we can operate without physical forms, all depending on what our mission statement is, all depending on where we are exploring, all depending on what kind of reality field we are part of. So we begin to understand that energy and consciousness can be little orbs. It can be a light body, but it's not spiritual. It's not angels. This is just different types of reality configuration that allows for different types of non-organic manifestation vessels that operates with different types of energy units for a specific purpose of upgrading specific type of consciousness units. And if we plot in the technology with that, and then also look at this reality we're part of, supposed to undo the effects of the timeline event. That means that as we change, our perception of reality change. It's not that it's an illusion, it is a highly specified restoration program that's to take us step by step and re-engineer our original genetic composition, to become holographically, energetically aware, conscious beings that are capable of operating across all dimensions and across all sectors in and outside of time and space with advanced technology, and at the same time also do what we call the consciousness evolution that has nothing to do with any source or God or what have you, but has all to do with the main purpose of the different evolutionary cycles.
It makes me think of this, I think it was Isaac Asimov quote, who did all these science fiction movies, something about like any advanced technology, super advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Yeah. Basically meaning what some people think of as magic, quote unquote. This maybe it's just some really highly advanced technology that they just don't understand. You know, so it's, the other thing that was coming up while you were saying this is, what then are the bigger questions, you know, that we haven't been asking, or where do we need to aim the same questions, or if we are asking the right questions, how can they be asked differently? Or I'm really interested in this point because this is something everybody can do for themselves almost immediately, is ask questions, right? Yeah. There's a whole nother ballgame on how to ask questions, when, and at the right times, all this stuff. But let's just say, you know, what questions should we be asking?
Of course, I have to throw in here that I have spent the last 10 years in the whole academy material to give the answers to all of that. Mm-hmm. And it's not just about asking one question, then you get all the answers. Sure. Because we need to, first and foremost, for me, the most important thing is that people, as we also know from some of your studies within other types of ancient teaching systems, which the majority is for the sake of easiness called Buddhism, but it's not. Let's just call it the easy solution of that one, so we don't get into a whole philosophical discussion about what that is. We have got our own discussion on my take on Buddhism, which is part of the whole Academy free YouTube videos. But the whole point is recalling. It's about remembering what we are. That's the first most important step. So if I here put in and say, okay, let's clean the table, and said, yes, we have had the hijackers. Yes, there have been what appears to be reptoid-looking species here. And yes, some of them did turn into the first ones that were seated in here or grounded here as part of their regression dynamics. They literally turned into that we now interpret as dinosaurs. So we can then say, since we are seeing them as animals because we're only seeing the bones, then we don't know what consciousness capacity they actually had. Their physical form was what we understand as dinosaur or reptoid, but they might actually have looked a little bit different, because if that was just a physical form, like we have insectoids that are now in insects on our planet right now, but they have their true feature in the fourth dimension. Then they just put their organic vessel here, so they're seeded into the restoration program, from where they can then recalibrate their organic DNA in a specific type of vessel that can be re-engineered into whatever feature they like. They don't have to look like a humanoid with head and arms and legs. Whatever feature will be suitable for the purpose of re-engineering their DNA. So they don't need to have their original feature, or they can create a mini version of it. Or they can create, at that time, since the fourth dimension was still present, then space operate differently. And once that's solidified and we fell out of the fourth dimension, done deliberately, I would say, due to one of the last wars we had 12,000 years ago, they completely removed the fourth dimension from our level of reality and put it into an adjacent reality. So we're no longer merged into our reality, except from the technology to uphold this. And that's where that technology that we are looking at with the drones and the different UAPs were re-engineered to operate inside this reality, but still had the cloaking. And that's, again, as I claim, some of these large crystal pillars that were made to keep up the cloaking, they are now breaking down, because the species that used to maintain them, they are going. So they are just leaving, and they're leaving everything behind, like trashy tenants that don't bother cleaning up their mess. So they're just letting everything break down. So for me, the most important thing is that if we shift, okay, we're now going to a video where we can actually say that's a craft. That is one of the parallel races and some of their crafts. And that one is my best guess. I get a clear human operator, either present as a consciousness orb or as an actual physical being, or as an android that is operated via a consciousness orb that is connected to an operating center somewhere else in a larger craft that is outside our scope of reality. Because I see sometimes some of these fifth dimensional crafts coming in, what we will call mother crafts, very, very big crafts that are situated in the fifth dimension, where they're completely tangible in the fifth dimension, and then they send in these smaller objects. The typical light orbs, as we also see it on the sky, that's the ones that doesn't really need to manifest into physical reality. Typically, they're non-technological species from other dimensions or parallel dimensions. But when they create this plasma crystal, then they can operate inside this reality. And these are typically, when they are in that form, they are interacting in the ionosphere energetically, so that we could call it an ionospheric craft that work on the higher levels of our reality. That typically means the gamma frequency spectrum and close to the cosmic layers. So we are having, the more manifest they are, the closer they get to our reality, the higher up and the more plasma-like they are, the more they are operating on the different levels of the energetic spectrum that we are a part of our reality. So that's how of course these could be, since it appears as light, since it's a kind of a radar or something, it's not a direct footage, but we have seen other footage from people on the ground where they see this as light. And the next question that I hear many people ask is that why do they have these different shapes? And the tic-tac, as in kind of, that could either be elongated or like an egg kind of shape, and that's because it's close to our reality. So in that way, it has to have both the linear and the cylindrical form, whereas if you go up the ionosphere, similar to the planets and the sun, they're all circular. They're spheres. There's a reason why these large objects have a spherical form, similar to the craft I saw in Australia. That was a humongously big sphere. And that's because when you are in a spherical form, you kind of operate with all levels of the holographic energetic reality field configuration from all angles. You're leveling out the pressure points. So you don't, if you have an elongated one, you have pressure points. That demands a kind of propulsion. But if you do a spherical one, you can interact directly with energy in your surroundings, creating what we call an accretion disk around it. Again, this is an android-driven vessel, again, parallel system. Malevolent, if you ask me. That's a malevolent craft. That's a threat, if you want to go with that one. The light orbs, the drones, the tic-tacs, non-malevolent. They are part of the construction, or part of the ones that are trying to figure out what's going on in the ionosphere with the frequency fence. We have the kind of control mechanisms, the cubes that are up there, they're in a sphere, which again levels out the pressure points of this reality and bridges us into the fourth dimension. And the cube itself is technically a fifth dimensional feature connected to cubes in the fifth dimension, but the manifestation of that into this reality. That's what I get. That can also always be expanded and elaborated on in more details. Yeah.
So it looks like this one we have another sphere, light sphere perhaps, or what are you getting on this one?
Yeah, that one for me, that is a probing drone that is from a complete parallel system. It's just visiting, just scouting.
It's interesting, its movement. It's like shaking back and forth, but still going in the same direction, right?
Yeah, it could just be the footage. It's also when you look at these high energy type of cameras, there are what we call interference due to the ionospheric or the environment itself. Similar when you look at the stars in the sky, they seem as if they're moving backwards and forwards.
Twinkling, as we can see the background here. It's just like shaking and moving.
It's doing the same thing, so it's not
like an energy imprint, isn't it? Yeah, or
it's because people, they look out there, they think that this world is manifest. It's not, it's energy.
Yeah.
And all energy fluctuates. So it's just fluctuating energy that we're looking at when we do these high energy. Sorry, I haven't got the term for it.
But that was from you said it was from a parallel system,
like
a
just
probe
scouting.
or scouting.
That one is a malevolent craft as well. So and for me, whenever they come so far down, they have to have clearance to do that. So for me, these crafts are connected to some of the deep projects that are not from the future humanities, but actually are from what we would call enhanced humans of this reality, enhanced with alien DNA. That one I get the read of being also malevolent. And what are they doing? They're literally just traveling through from point A to point B, from one, could be one base to another, not bothering about whether, or because they're a little bit superior minded. They don't care if they're being viewed because they have clearance to be here, because they're collaborating with specific groups within humanity. And since that specific group within humanity, whatever their name is, because they've got many names and some of them are more accurate than others, they do have full control of this reality. The interesting thing about that, once you see it circles, it has this typical rotation dynamic to it, which we're also seeing which is another way of leveling out the pressure points of this reality, because the frequency energies, it's not gravity, but they have a kind of a weighing to them. Let's put it this, when you create that accretion disk around itself, if you don't have the spherical form that levels out the pressure points, that's the only way I can explain it, then that thing will become more and more heavy. It will begin to go into entropy, because the frequency spectrum has an idea of going from order state into entropy, thermodynamics. So it's not gravity that they are using this type of rotation for. It's not to throw off gravity or to level out gravity, because in my opinion, gravity doesn't exist. It's an other dimensional feature. but it is to avoid the entropy, the solidification. That's what entropy is. You have the original fourth dimensional features you see now. It can shift in and out of reality. Once it's solidified inside this reality, it will naturally begin to regress, quote unquote, on the consciousness level, and will naturally begin to go into entropy. It will begin to calcify. And that's why you do the rotation, so that you throw this off by creating a pulse that throws off the solidification dynamics that are part of the effects of the timeline event. So that's the way that once you go from the fourth dimension into ours, the question is if it has replicated itself or it's a mirror of it that's kind of dividing itself into two, again, to level out the pressure points. That's the best way I can say it. So it's all about administering reality energies in a way so it doesn't go into entropy, begin to calcify. And if it goes into that, if they don't do that, some of the early crafts, then it crashes. So now we get to the understanding of why this advanced technology can crash. Because in the beginning, what came in the 1950s, they didn't know the entropy dynamics of a reality field. They saw the fourth dimension, came in here, rode on the fourth dimensional networks, but did not understand the entropy dynamics of the frequency as part of the enclosure, which is, unfortunately, one of the re-engineering features of the hijacking races. So that's a kind of a safety mechanism for both beings and crafts and whatever that comes into this reality that's not supposed to be here. If they don't understand these dynamics and learns to counter it, part of the re-engineering and reverse engineering programs creating different types of crafts that are operational inside this reality as well as outside, which is part of some of the military programs that's going on here, well, then these crafts will solidify and they will crash. And then they can't be retrieved. But then they are dysfunctional. And the core that goes with point zero energy, the neutron field, will then no longer be operational. That will be taken out, and the operator will have regressed into, unless it's a gray, but the gray, their biometrics will also break down, and by that they will not be operational as we're supposed to, and then they die, quote unquote, die too. They kind of have a meltdown, if you like, due to the solidification mechanics.
Wow.
For me, that one, I think I'm not going to put my head on a scaffold on that one, but I do think that's human.
You mean this is a fake video?
No, I mean this is a human drone. I don't know what that facility is, but I keep thinking industrial, what do you call it, espionage. I get a feeling that could be a reverse engineered human drone. I don't get the alien engineering on it at all. I get human. So something could be going on in that storage facility because, again, as I said, we have different factions within the human operators that are working with the different alien groups from the parallel systems that are hostile per definition and territorial. So if one facility is working with specific type of component that leads to one of their reverse engineered crafts, well, then you do espionage and reading the environment to get the different code signatures of that technology. That's what I get when I look at that one.
Well, I'm pretty sure this is the last one or second to last video. So is there anything else you want to wrap up with here? This has been fascinating. It's been a huge download for me of information to go back and listen to this. I've been taking notes too, and probably include some of these in the show notes. But it's been quite an eye-opener to hear not only just everything in the videos, but all the background information that goes
I would
with
say
it.
the greatest takeaway of this one for those who are getting into the science and Aero and NASA and whoever's on this one, you better figure out which one are the hostile ones. Them you can shoot down. The ones that are keeping up a reality, I would not shoot them down. That would be detrimental to awakening process. But it must also be taken into consideration that they are not working well anymore, and our reality configuration is breaking down, and we have got challenges with that. And for the commoners like me and you and everybody else who are out there in everyday life, the most important thing for us is to learn to monitor and scan and rebuild our own energy system. It's not spirituality, people. It's nothing to do with source. It's nothing to do with archangels. Archangels are cubes fifth dimensional program cubes. It has nothing to do with guides. These are astral distorted beings from different realms that have been lost, genetic components gathering different forms of distortion energies. As long as we're not utilizing our energy system and consciousness potentials in alignment with the original reality configuration, we go into entropy as well. And since our energies are connected to consciousness, then our type of entropy is not just solidification as we see it in illness and the decay of the human form. It is also distortion energies that lingers on once we are letting go of this body, and our original holographic energy system and architecture is pulled back into the storage unit, quote unquote, where unfortunately they're not under our control anymore. So we have a huge challenge here if we are going to deal with the future challenges of the real worlds, of the holographic energetic worlds, and what we came from and what it truly means to be advanced. Being advanced is not just about technology. That's like, are we an advanced civilization because we've got computers and iPhones? No, not at all. That's just low-level type of technology. It doesn't make us advanced. Our psychological level is primitive. We are warring, we are deceiving, we are lying, we are run by personal desires and greed. And that's not spirituality. That's just looking in, okay, we are part of a huge reality field that we interact with, that we, via our energy system, are impacting with different forms of energies. It's common sense. We are now seeing it on the physical level. We're ruining our planet because we have for a long time been ruining the energetic fields around it. Now it's just descending into the physical world as we know of it, because that's the last end game stage of all existence. It solidifies, goes into entropy, become matter forms as we know of it, generates more and more distortion, and until it starts to dysfunction and then collapse, as we're seeing it with some of the UAPs that are now become visible. They are doing their very best. Let me put it that way, the UAPs of the original reality program configuration technology. But they nobody's maintaining them. And humanity and whatever's been done to humanity, what's been done to our holographic energetic architecture, what's been done to the reality field we're part of, what's been done to our solar system, we seriously need to remember who and what we are and what we are capable of, what our true capacities are, and how we can interact and operate with reality as it is. And that's the truth that we need to find, not a truth of a specific teaching system, not a truth of specific technology, or not saying this is the truth above all truth, or this is what leads us into this realm of that we are angelic beings or what have you. Because all of this, in my opinion, is distortion. It's about clearing the clutter, it's about understanding who we are, and it's about taking responsibility for our project that were to undo the effects of the timeline event and get back on track on that one. And then it's a steep learning curve because we are up against quote unquote time. We're down to 4% of frequency energies. Once we get down to 3, 2, 1, then we are back to the original holographic energetic configuration, and that will happen within the next 10 to 50 years. All depending on how quickly these UAPs or these different type of reality drones will begin to break down. Once they do that, then the only ones that can keep up that configuration is humanity. And if there are groups that are changing the paradigm of humanity into a specific timeline where we are up against a quote-unquote hostile alien agenda, which we are, but it's re-engineered as a kind of, you're saying this is the danger, but in fact you're the danger itself, then we are taking part of a program that leads us into a rabbit hole where the danger is legit, but we have joined a danger that's not necessarily there, but has been created for the purpose of engineering that timeline, from where we will then be led into another hijacker program where we again will not be allowed to activate and recall who we are as a solar system civilization. So that's my take on that one. That would be my warning in this line of work. And if people then say, due to their psychological comfort zone and the different denial ideas and programs that they are under, yes, it is difficult. Nobody said it was easy. It was not easy when we were hit by the timeline event that reconfigured a whole universe. Nothing is simple. Nothing is easy. Nothing is done in 2 days. There are no quick answers. There are only processes. The questions that must be asked are the questions that lead to developmental processes. The studies that must be done are to learn to work multidimensionally. It is to reconfigure the brain to work on multiple levels of reality. It is the ability to both work inside this reality as well as expand into the other realities. It is to ignite the original high order senses that goes with the holographic energetic energy system and architecture, so we can operate in the other dimensions while we're still in this physical form. It has nothing to do again with spirituality. It has nothing to do with becoming light beings. We can choose to become that. We can choose to shed off this form and become orbs of consciousness and energy that can move out of the enclosure via the gate systems that's built in. There's a lot of things to be learned. There's a lot of things we can do with this. But the right questions here is to, let's put it this way, turn everything upside down. Be bold enough to throw out everything and look at, okay, if we take this idea that I'm here presenting and work from that angle, that we once were an advanced civilization. Why are we now so downsized? Why are we in oblivion? What happened? Why we're not that advanced anymore? How could we produce that type of technology that we have forgotten? Why have we forgotten it? What is it that we need to recall? Why are we not recalling it automatically? Similar when we work in remembrance psychotherapists, when we work with childhood trauma. Why do we have defense mechanisms that do not make us look into these dynamics? Why we're not eagerly trying to recall who and what we are? What's the pain? What's the trauma? Or is it pure manipulation? And if so, how do we go around this manipulation? Or is it both? What's going on when we go through the prohibiting technologies and what's been put in there as part of the hijacking? What's behind that? What is it that we don't want to recognize since we so gladly allow these technologies to take control of us in that manner that we were an advanced civilization? How far have we regressed? What did we choose when we went into the restoration program? Where did we leave behind our original vessels? What's the library? All of these things that I put into my material. And I'm not saying my material is the only angle, because we were many different civilizations that were part of the solar system. So there are many different angles. But the question is, the first important one is to say, we used to be much more. Every myth we have tells us that there was a golden age. Now we are in the Kali Yuga, to use the Hindu terminology. Why we're here? What did we do? And take that responsibility first and foremost. Like all spiritual teaching systems say, learn to work with who and what you are. Compassion, empathy, understanding, self-nurture, kindness, but at the same time, investigative modalities, sciences, understanding this is not just about gods or God or whatever. It doesn't end there. It goes beyond that. We are the gods. We are the ones that created this. We were one of the most advanced civilization in the whole quadrant when we were hit by the timeline event. There's no need for gods. All of these are groups from other planets coming in, taking control, pretending to be gods. There are no gods. There are different civilizations. Step one, get rid of religion in that manner. We can have belief systems, we can have ideas, but understand them as belief systems, as ideas, as theories, as something that we can lean onto for a while we're working through different difficult periods of our time. There are these systems as well. Once we clean through that one, well, then we need new ideas, new concepts of reality, new paradigms, new visions of whatever that is. And in that, also understand that most of what we do produce, whether it's religion or it's science or it's spirituality or it's psychology, are projections of mind. We produce it as part of our consciousness potentials. And once we have learned what we need to learn from that angle of reality, it is our duty to progress and move on and expand and learn new stuff and not cling on to what we had of ideas because it makes us feel good or because it gives us power or because it gives us position. We are here as an evolving, expanding, progressive race that are to learn to master energy and consciousness. And that means constant developmental processes. It means that the power we yield is not the power for selfish purposes. It is the power to transform and upgrade and evolve realities, universes, solar systems. Our technology is not to war and to fight others and create congregation and segregation. It is to expand into new layers of the universal cycles where consciousness can prosper and evolve us all into enormously consciously advanced beings that are not relying on technology, but as part of the end cycles learn to operate solely by our consciousness alone, administering universal structures with our consciousness alone, not as individuals, but as teams, as civilizations, as races that are working together to administer and upgrade what is left of the previous cycles into a whole new configuration that will then become the background of the next universal cycles. That's the goal. And technology is just a minor part of that one. But where we are now, that technology is pushing us to a new reconfiguration and to new modalities of mind. And that's why we can say, well, if we look at it from an extraterrestrial point of view and say it's all extraterrestrial, then we're missing the point. We need to discern there as well. Because one of the most important things when we work with energy is the ability to discern between different states of energy, different purposes of energy, the different factions that are utilizing the different forms of energy, and the different types of consciousness potentials that are tied into these different energetic realms. So that's kind of my end, a little bit high-leveled closure on what I want to say to these different footages that we have here seen.
Well, beautiful. I think that's a good place to end it. So we'll just wrap up here now, even though there's maybe 3 minutes of this video left. I think that's a perfect
unless you have some
place.
kind of remarks.
I really don't have anything else to add to that. It's a tough act to follow. Just letting this all sink in and going over it.
Yes. And with that one, thank you for listening in. And I think that this ends up that little series I have made where it begins with the new reality for Earth, the new reality for humanity, and this one's going to be called the new reality for science. And there will be a lot of questions, and as those of you who take this in and will contemplate upon it and meditate and sit with it for a while, go into your heart, feel what's there, and then ask yourself that deep, profound question. Why did you choose to go into oblivion? Thank you.